next session of the Antardrishti. And I extend the warm welcome to this session on the decarbonization for the steel industry. I am Rajesh Kumar, sir, Senior Manager HRD at MTI, and I'm delighted for the host for the today's session. Along with me are also connected Sanjay Dhar, sir, CGM HRD, MTI, and ED Safety with additional charge of ED HRD, Ashish Chakravarti, sir, and all the seniors from SAIL. I welcome you all, sir. Antardrishti, as you all know, sir, has been a journey of knowledge and insights. And today, the next edition also promises to be another milestone. So without further much ado, let's begin with the session. And to the for the welcome address and setting the tone, may I request Ashish Chakravarti, sir, for his input, sir. Sir, please.
Thank you, Rajesh. Very good morning, the esteemed participants, and very good evening, Mr. Shivkumar Kuppuswamy, Development and Innovation Director of Responsible Steel. It is with great pleasure and enthusiasm I extend a warm welcome to each one of you for the today's session of Antardrishti. I understand it's a quite late evening now at Canada, and my sincere thanks to Mr. Kuppuswamy for accepting our request for delivering his thoughts on sustainable steel. As an Executive Director of HRD, it is my privilege to kickstart the program, what promises to be an enlightening and insightful discussion. Antardrishti has always been a more than just a series of online interactions. It's a platform for fostering knowledge, exchange, and exploring fresh perspectives and driving forward thinking initiatives. Today's session holds a special significance as we discuss the critical topic of decarbonization in Indian steel industry. Decarbonization, as all we know, is a pressing issue that demands our attention and collective action. As a leaders in the steel sector, it's an imperative for us to understand the challenges, identify the tools at our disposal, and explore the innovative solutions that pave the way towards a sustainable future. It is an opportunity for us to listen to a speaker for today's session, Mr. Shivkumar Kuppuswamy, who is actively engaged in the intersection between energy, engineering, and the environment, with a primary focus on global steel sector decarbonization. We have the privilege of learning from industry expert who brings invaluable insights and experiences to the table. I encourage each one of you to actively engage, ask questions, and share your thoughts as we embark on the journey of exploration and discovery together. Let us take this opportunity to extend our understanding, challenge our perspectives, and pave the way for meaningful challenge in the steel industry. Once again, I extend my heartfelt welcome to each one of you. Thank you for being a part of Antardrishti, and I look forward to an enriching and productive session ahead. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for setting the stage for the insightful discussion, sir. Now let's delve into the heart of the matter. And for that, we have the speaker today, Shivkumar Kuppuswamy. Shiva, as we call him, is the Director Development and Innovation at Responsible Steel. And I am honored to introduce him. Shiva has the bachelor's degree in metallurgical engineering and has more than 30 years of experience in the core engineering sectors. He has got keen interest in the climate change and is passionate about finding pathways to reduce the industry's carbon footprint and impact on the global climate. Shiva is also a Chevening scholar and has completed his management program from Manchester Business School and holds a master's in climate change from University of Waterloo, Canada. He has done various leadership roles internationally and has also managed his consulting practice centered around the metallurgical engineering and offering low carbon footprint advisory for building environment and process industries. So without further delay, let's welcome Shiva to share his visible insights, invaluable insights on building the on this topic, decarbonization in industrial industry. Sir, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, Mr. Ashish Chakravarti, for that very warm and generous introduction by both of you. I'm very sorry for this little bit of delay that happened, before the kickoff. Some technical snags. Glad that I'm able to join now. Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
India is very close to me. India is very close to responsible steel. I travel, I visit India very frequently, twice, thrice in a year. And we engage. For us, India is a very strategic country to be involved in. As the world's second largest steel producer, it's a critical country if we have to decarbonize the industry. Without Indian role, without Indian active participation, we will not be reaching the end goal of that. So with that perspective, it's critical for us. And I'm so very happy to be part of this meeting today, Antardrashti with SAIL. I do visit SAIL once in a while when I'm in India. Happy for this invitation. This topic was given to me. It reads Decarbonization in India's Steel Industry, Challenges, Tools, and Solutions. But I also see one more thing, a fourth element, a fourth dimension into this, in addition to the challenges, tools, and solutions. And that is, the opportunities. So what I've done is I've taken the liberty to, slightly modify the topic to also include opportunities as part of the title. So we look at challenges, we look at the tools, we look at the solutions, but we'd also want to look at opportunities, because there's no such thing as a challenge, or there's no such thing as a problem without a gift or without a solution, or without some kind of reward. In its
I request the others to kindly mute your mics.
So every problem comes with an opportunity. In fact, there's a tremendous opportunities, and what I hope to be, discussing very quickly and briefly is to also look at the problems, the solutions, but also the opportunities as well. There has been several perspectives on steel decarbonization. Various leaders around the world have given their thoughts and vision towards steel decarbonization, why it's so important. And so has the Honorable Prime Minister of India. Also has a very interesting quote on steel decarbonization. And it reads, I'm just quoting as it is, as you can see on the screen, India's commitment to steel decarbonization is not just a response to global pressures. It's a reflection of our determination to build a sustainable future for our nation. In that, what the critical part here is that there's a commitment to build a sustainable future. And that sustainable future is, of course, linked to decarbonizing steel. India has made very tall progress and commitments as part of nationally determined climate goals, climate commitments to COP, both in Glasgow and also in Dubai, and in Sharm el-Sheikh as well. And that includes maximizing the renewable capacity and other things. In addition to that, also the industrial decarbonization. There's another gentleman who also has a view on steel decarbonization, and that is Bill Gates, who I presume you all know. And he, very succinctly also includes the economic opportunity, true to Bill Gates's philosophy, true to what Bill Gates holds in his ideals. He looks at the economic opportunity within every problem. And that's the topic. That's how we need to look at it. It is a challenge, it's a problem, but it certainly has within itself a lot of opportunities, provided the right steps are taken. We see responsible steel as part of the solution. We see us playing a critical role in transitioning the global steel production towards a clean, sustainable production through our standard and our certification program. I want to spend just a few minutes on the India growth story, and I'll also tell you why it's important to look at it and why it's relevant and why it's important for steel. We all know that India has been doing extraordinarily well over the last 3-4 years, despite what's happening globally. The global markets are in recession, there's high interest costs, the finance costs are high, inflation is record high in most of the Western world, here in Canada, in the US, in Europe. We have very high inflationary pressures in the market, and that has impacted the economy as a whole. But the silver lining, what we see is coming out of India. The numbers from India are pretty encouraging. And there's been a consistent growth upwards of 7% over the last, projected for the next 3 years and beyond. Even beyond, it looks to be a very promising growth trajectory in India. Now, why is this very important? There's another story to this growth story, very unique to India that is very critical, and that is the mean age of the Indian population. If we look at the Indian population, the mean age today, it's hovering around the mid-30s, and so in most cases, less than is around the 30 mark. And even in 2000, the country's mean age is only about 50. This is in stark contrast to most other global economies of the world that are dealing with an aging population and a declining population, whereas India is blessed with demography that still is relatively young, and it's a demography that is largely getting affluent, and it's growing with a lot of an aspiration. What this means, these key growth numbers, key factors, what it means is that there's going to be a lot of demand for a lot of produce from the country, and one of that includes, of course, steel. As the GDP grows, as you have a younger economy that gets into the job market, there's going to be a consistent demand for steel, and the Indian steel industry and the Indian government recognizes that. And this is just an image, an infograph to show that globally the steel production and the world GDP is tightly coupled. So as you have a growth in GDP, you would have some years where it's not directly coupled. You'll have some years where it kind of falls down. So the years when we had the pandemic, the years when we had the global economic recession, there are some critical milestones in this window of time frame that you see where things happen beyond the control of the industry. Obviously, the production fell, but overall trajectory, if you look at it, this is from 1960, but if you scale back or move forward beyond 2010, in fact, beyond 2010, it's very tightly coupled. This infograph stops at 2010, but beyond 2010, it's very tightly coupled, and the GDP is linked to crude steel production. And that's a similar trend that we see in India as well. But with all this growth and with all this increased production of steel and aluminum and cement and other metals in an economy, it is not happening in isolation. As that is happening, there's also an increased emissions that are happening. The greenhouse gas emissions are also continuously increasing. What you're seeing here on your screen right now is an extract from the assessment report 6 that was released by the UNFCCC. This is the most recent report, and you could see largely 3 graphs: red, green, and a light blue color, and a band of shades between them. We don't have sufficient time to go in great detail, but essentially what it means is that the current implemented policies are the red line that you see, the nationally determined contribution, of which India is also one of the countries that has given us NDCs to the UNFCCC and the climate agreement. That is way above what is required for under 2 degrees or even 1.5 degrees. The gap between the commitment that has been made, the red line, and between an ambition of 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees to restrict the global average mean temperature between these two temperatures, that gap is pretty vast. And I do understand, I do recognize the fact that the Indian government's commitment to near net zero is in fact 20 years more than most of the global commitment, which is 2050, whereas India is 2070 and China is 2060. I do recognize that, but there are several companies within India, large companies, both in steel and as well as in other industries, have pledged for a 2050. And in fact, some of them have even pledged before 2050. So that's a good thing. That's a very encouraging and a positive development, which we encourage, we welcome, and we hope. And our endeavor is that the other businesses in the country and the government as well takes a hard look at it, because the climate change impacts are severe in India. We've seen increased weather events in India. We've seen crop patterns getting changed. We've seen incredible amount of heat over the last decade or so, which is gradually increasing, and all of this is impacting the GDP. So if we want to have the projected GDP exceeding 7%, and exceeding 4 trillion and moving on up to $5 and $10 trillion over the next 20-30 years, that would not be possible if we have massive inclement climate conditions in the country. And it's very important and very imperative to see both these things hand in hand. So sustainability, ESG, and all of these things are tightly coupled, and they're not in isolation to each other. If you want to have a strong economic growth, you need to also have a very strong climate commitment. If I want to describe the challenge that is prevailing in India, or the challenge in India as a whole, I think this one slide kind of very succinctly puts across this challenge very clearly. The national steel policy is basically doubling, in fact, more than doubling the production capacity from its current levels of 126 million tons to upwards of 300 million tons by 2030. So over the next 6 years, the country is going to sort of more than double its production capacity, crude steel production in steel in India. During the same period, the per capita consumption is expected to almost double from its 80 odd kilograms per capita to about almost 160 odd kilograms, again, over the next 6 years. So what this actually means is, as you're doubling your production capacity and a per capita consumption, you're also doubling the emission that comes out of the steel industry. And that is likely to be in the order of over 750 million tons carbon dioxide that's coming out of the country. Today, at the Ministry of Steel, numbers are 2.5 tons carbon dioxide per ton of steel, but that is excluding the Scope 3 emissions. Now, if you include the Scope 3 emissions, that's probably going to be, exceeding 2.8, maybe close to 3 in some sites, which is way above the global average. But that's part of the problem. There are two infographics that you see here. There are some horizontal bar charts here. And these bar charts basically show the new production capacity that is being added. And very interestingly, India is adding more blast furnace capacity, producing steel through a primary coal-based production route, even more than China. So in the case of announced projects in India, nearly 47% of them are going to be produced through a primary blast furnace production route. Now, what this means is, even by 2050, we will be having a lot of blast furnace production happening in India. And we understand that. I mean, we understand that there are jobs tied to this, there's investment already made, and we totally understand the need for that. Now, if you piece all of these things together and look at some key headlines, if you want to define as challenge, the first headline is, of course, there's going to be coal-based production, which was going to be dominating the steel production even at 2050. We're going to double the capacity, but at the same time, we're also doubling the emissions over the next 6 years. It's a growing economy. We have a young population, aspirational population. There's going to be demand, not just for steel, but there's going to be a demand for all kinds of, products and services. But the levers that are, the levers that are available for decarbonization are limited. India doesn't have. You are from the industry, so I don't have to go into details of, steel production and stuff like that. But it suffice to highlight that natural gas is a key concern. That lever doesn't exist in India because it's either too expensive or it's available in very limited quantities. And scrap is another major commodity that still is not available in desired quantities in India. There's a national scrap recycling policy. A lot of companies are setting up scraps recycling centers. Private companies are setting up those centers within the country. But we still don't have enough scrap, and scrap cannot be produced. It has to come only from an economy, and an economy that matures. And if you look at, if you piece together, the scarcity of the natural resources like natural gas and scrap, and the growing capacities of primary steel production, it looks like it's going to be a very high emission trajectory. We still don't have all details in terms of the technology tool that is adopted in these primary production, whether this primary production is going to have an integrated carbon capture as part of the design, or it's going to be added on at some point in time. What's the policy with respect to relining of blast furnaces? These are critical questions which are policy dependent. We'll reflect a little bit more on the policy aspects of steel decarbonization as we move along in this presentation. So what really India needs just transition that is based on equity, and India also needs to balance its economic aspirations, development aspirations, alongside its climate targets, and it's a real intricate dance. Now, we've defined the challenge, we've defined the problem, and I want to actually spend a considerable amount of time looking at the solution, and that's where we come in. Who are we? Responsible Steel. We are a global multi-stakeholder organization. We work globally with all steel industries, all types of steel production, and our mission is basically to maximize the steel sector's contribution to a sustainable society. And we want to try and do that through our standard and certification program. It's a multi-stakeholder forum. It's based on trust, it's based on transparency, and it's based on consensus. In our membership, we have steelmakers, buyers, the upstream mining companies, trade, finance, and the whole host of steel supply chain in our membership. We presently have exceeding 160 members across the steel value chain, and we represent 15% of the global steel in our membership. That's about 250 million tons plus in our membership. We have essentially 3 categories of membership: business members, civil society members, and associate membership. The business and the civil society members have a voting right, meaning they participate in all standard development process, and they have an opportunity to vote. And our board of directors are also set up in a similar fashion. So we have key industry leaders in our board. The chairman of the board is Mr. Jerry Tidd. He's from BlueScope. The vice chairman is from a civil society, Dan Salignan. He's from Ceres, which is a not-for-profit finance organization based out of Boston in the US. And then we have from India, we have Tata Steel represented in our board. We have a director from Tata Steel in our board. And then we have ArcelorMittal on our board. And then we have other civil society members from the unions and from the flora and fauna industry and so on and so forth. So it's a very careful assembly of industry and civil society being part of the secretariat and part of our board of directors. And it's structured in that manner because we want to have the opinions and voice of all stakeholders heard. We don't want just one group of our members dominating the proceeding, driving the way the standard is evolved. We want to ensure that all voices are heard. And that's very unique to Responsible Steel. And our members, of course, are worldwide. We have members across all 5 continents of the world. These are, I'm not going to read all of these names. I'm sure you recognize some of these names. This is a broad canvas of a membership, both business, civil society, as well as associate members. The associate members, of course, are research institutes, academic think tanks. For example, Terry is an associate member in Responsible Steel from India. We've talked about climate change. We've talked about the need to balance economy and growth, economy and steel production. So I'm not going to go back and spend further time on this. In the interest of time, I'll skip. Finance is key. Finance is super critical for decarbonization in any part of the world, and more so in developing economy like India. There are several studies that have made projections for the extent of money that is required to decarbonize. If you look at the IEA's report, it puts steel's requirement globally at around $2 trillion. Now, if you add hydrogen and if you add carbon capture and other surrounding technology toolkits, then that number quickly jumps to close to $4 or $5 trillion. This is the global requirement. The number is quite significant in India too, in terms of the capex and the opex that is required for decarbonization. So what we've done is at Responsible Steel is we run. In fact, I run a finance working group connecting the financial institutions, which includes both banks and asset managers and the steel industry, and we try and create an engagement platform to identify what are the key metrics for measurement, what are the key assessment criteria, how does the cash flow look like, what's a successful business case. Essentially, to put it very simply, what we're trying to achieve is we want to give clarity to the industry seeking the capital to make to the bank whatever information that the bank needs very clearly. And the banks are also trying to wrap their head around steel, which is very new for them. And so they're trying to develop their own requirements from the industry. So we're trying to bridge these two constituents. And the reason why we are able to bridge these two constituents is because the financing decisions are increasingly based on emission intensity of the steel, which means that the margin calls are directly proportionate to your emission intensity. If you produce steel economically, if you produce steel with a low carbon intensity, then you get better terms in your finance. So it's directly correlated. So the financial institutions need an independent third-party validation to ensure that the emission values given by the steel industries are credible, and that's where we come in. We do an independent third-party assessment, and the banks have found our audits and our certification fit for purpose. It's something that they can take as one of the decision-making tools to lend to the site that is requiring the money. We've had instances in the past where some of our members were able to access capital using our standard in the certification program. We've had one of our members raise close to about $4.5 billion of revolving credit facility. We had another member raise close to about $1.5 billion. This is from the US to raise through green bonds. So there's a lot of transition finance, sustainability linked bonds, and transition bonds that are happening that are based on emission performance of the steel. Let me now just move on to the heart of the subject, which is our standard. The version 2 of the standard was released in September of last year. As you can see, our standard has got 13 principles across the ESG, the governance, social, and environmental principles. But if you look more closely, what's really telling here is there's only one principle out of this 13 that is specifically focused on the greenhouse gas and the climate change, whereas the remaining 12 are focused on the social aspects of steel production, which includes labor rights, human rights, biodiversity, water stewardship, governance, so on and so forth. And there's a design intentionally this way because we want to bring about a complete change in the way the industry operates, in the way the industry interacts with the community, impacts the community, and how the community in turn impacts the industry. So we want to bring in a holistic ESG change across the whole steel value chain. And therefore, it's not just about greenhouse gas emissions alone, but it's also about all the other social factors. And in fact, the social criteria and the social factors outnumber the greenhouse gas and environmental principles within the responsible steel standard. There's about close to about 600 different requirements and over right now it's over 70 criteria under which the site will be audited, approved, and certified through a third-party process. Like I said before, we are spread all across the world, across all the 6 continents, and we offer 2 types of certifications. The first level of certification is called a core certification. And then you have a progress certification where a site can apply for a product or a steel certification. Now, so far, we have certified more than 115 million tons of this. The data here needs to be a little bit updated, but we have close to about 115 million tons of certified sites now across the world. In India, we have Tata Steel, which is already a certified site, and we have audits going on in our other members. Some of the largest steel plants in the world, like POSCO in South Korea, is a certified site. In the US, excuse me, in the US Steel is a certified site. ArcelorMittal sites across Europe, Voestalpine, ThyssenKrupp. These are I can keep going, but some of the largest steel plants are a member. So, like I mentioned to you, the maturity model is the first step is to become a member of Responsible Steel. The second step is to apply for a core certification, where the steel site would be assessed based on 12 principles. And then once the core certified is achieved, the site can then apply for a steel certification where all 13 principles would apply. In the steel certification, Principle 3, responsible sourcing, and Principle 10, the greenhouse gas and climate change principles would apply in total. But in core certification, these 2 principles would not be applied in full. So that's the difference between the core and the steel certification. Now, these 2 principles, Principle 3 and Principle 10, was included as part of the version 2.0 last year. So it's now in test phase. And therefore, our steel certification is yet to be rolled out. We are currently in a test phase. We have some steel members from across the world, including Tata Steel in India, who are part of this test phase. And the first certified steel, in fact, was anticipated in 2023, but it's likely to be rolled out by April, May of this year. Our audit process, as I told you, is a third-party audit process. It's very rigorous. I'm not going to go into all details of this, but it's basically, it follows a 3-tier process. So we have identified auditors across the world. And if you go onto our website, you will see the list of approved certified bodies and auditors. Those names are part of our list. And our members choose the auditors that they want to use for the purpose. And that is because, we work globally, and not all auditors are operating across the world. But in order to be approved as an accredited auditor of responsible steel, if it's a new company that's applying to be an auditor, then they would have to go through a validation process, a training process, and an approval process, after which they will be made an auditor. Now, what happens is once this auditor gets onto the site, audits the site across the 500 criteria, 13 principles, and those results are sent back with the report and recommendation to the Secretariat, to our assurance team. Our assurance and certification team reviews it with the Secretariat, with all of us. And then it goes outside responsible steel to an independent assurance panel. That's what you see in the dark blue box here. This is a group of experts who are not from responsible steel. They are independent. They are outside responsible steel. They're drawn from the industry. They look at all of these audit reports carefully. They make the recommendation, and then it goes to the board of directors of responsible steel. The board then looks at it, approves it, and makes the final decision. So it's a very rigorous process of audit and a certification process, just to make sure that all key criteria is covered. There are no major non-conformities arising as a result of the practices that are happening within the steel site. What you're seeing here is our strategy. Our strategy essentially has 3 pillars: integrity, influence, and impact. Our standard and the certification program gives us the integrity. The influence is, how do we influence the steel value chain, the supply, the demand side, the upstream mining companies, the civil society, the members, the financial markets, and the whole steel ecosystem. The impact, as I told you, is we currently have about 250 million tons of steel represented in a membership, and over 115 million tons of certified steel, certified core certified sites, and certified steel. We'll see that number growing before the end of this year. When we launched this version 2.0, we had a lot of accreditations and public response and welcoming the release. There are a lot of big names who gave public statements in support of the work we do and in support of the standard. And it was launched based on, of course, through a voting process. And once we achieve 51% vote from business members and the civil society members is when the standard gets released. And that's the normal practice for us. And that's how the version 2.0 was released as well. I'll spend a little bit of time on 2 criteria that is part of the steel certification. The first one is Principle 3, responsible sourcing. This is a large, complex subject. That itself would require, maybe more than an hour to go in detail. So what I will do is I'll give you a quick overview in terms of what sourcing involves, responsible sourcing involves. The key objective for responsible sourcing is to bring about change in the raw material suppliers that supply to steel, the whole value chain that supplies into steel. We want to bring about a change. We want to influence the direction of travel towards ESG programs within these industries that supply to steel plants. That includes mining, that includes forestry, that includes, perhaps even transportation and all other materials and services that are used by the steel industry. There are largely 5 criteria on this responsible sourcing. The first thing is that the supply chain that supplies to steel industry commits to responsible sourcing. The steel site knows from where they're buying the material. They are able to evaluate the ESG performance of their suppliers, and they are able to continuously monitor, continuously make sure that there's a progress being made, and they have a public statement in terms of their sourcing program, and that is made publicly available. And that should state exactly what should be the ESG performance of the suppliers that supply into the steel site. Now we have multiple materials that are being supplied to a steel site, and each of these material needs to have certain emission needs to meet certain emission threshold. Because in the case of responsible steel, all raw materials that gets produced into the steel is taken into the emissions boundary. Now we understand the complexity of these materials that are shipped into the steel site, and it's not possible to know everything from stage 1, and therefore this is graded into 4 levels. And so, for example, if it's an iron ore, at level 1, a steel site can know more than 80% of where it's coming from. But in the case of scrap, it is very difficult to find out the origins of scrap, perhaps more than 40-50% at level 1. And that is because scrap is trade denominated. And if you're in steel melting shop and you have a production pressure, you need scrap. It's very difficult to go at that point in time and ask your procurement manager to find out where it's coming from and all of those things. And we understand that, we recognize, and therefore we have graded it to 4 levels based on each material. So at level 1, for an iron ore, for example, you need to know at least 80% of where it's coming from and how it's extracted and mined and transported. But for scrap, it's enough. It's okay if you know for 50% of where it's coming from. And then as you move forward from levels 1 to level 4, this progress is voluntary. The steel site makes the decision when to move and how fast they want to make the transition. But certainly when they need to achieve a level 4 certification, they probably need to know more than 90% of all raw material that gets into the site. This is really the most important part of a standard that's widely debated, widely discussed, publicized, and heavily discussed. This is Principle 10, the greenhouse gas and climate change principle, which is used to measure the carbon intensity of the steel that is produced. Now, the infograph on the top right-hand corner that you see here, where probably you can see my cursor, there are 4 levels
We
here.
could see, sir, sorry to interrupt. We could see the Chrome browser, sir, the browser option.
Sorry?
We could see the browser, the page of the responsible steel, 16 September 2022.
Oh, you're not seeing the, oh my God, you're not seeing, so far you've never seen the slide, is it?
We did so, but then we came to this page of the responsible steel, global civil society groups.
I think you have to switch over.
You have to switch over, sir, maybe, sir. It was there.
So slide 22 of 33 dikha raha hai. I think it's part of his slide. He's put in.
Which one, what was the last slide that you saw?
What I could see over here is the browser, sir. Maybe you can just minimize the browser. Since you're sharing.
I'm not too sure because oh, okay, just give me 1 second.
The last one you have seen is slide 21.
We have last.
It was, sir, a theory of change summary. Integrity,
Oh,
inspire,
okay.
influence, impact.
What do you see now?
Yeah,
Yes,
now
sir.
we see slide
Yes,
22.
yes.
Okay, great. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So on the top right-hand corner, the curves, the lines that you see are what the market and the industry calls it a sloping line. For us, these are progress levels. There are progress levels 1 to level 4. And these are measured against the percentage of scrap that is used in steel production, mapped against the intensity, the emissions intensity of the steel that is produced. The way that we landed on these curves and the slopes of these curves is based on a rigorous analysis of steel produced worldwide across all types of steel production. And we investigated data from over 400 different sites, and we subjected them to a regression analysis. And what the regression analysis showed, the outcome of that is what you see here as these lines. There's these 4 progress levels. The first progress level right on top is 2,800 kilograms carbon dioxide per ton, so 2.8 tons CO2. It's the global mean average of the carbon intensity of the steel that is produced. If you take emissions across the world and you take an average of all of them, 2.8 tons seems to be the average. But all these 4
Excuse me,
progress
sir.
lines.
Sir, can it be in the full screen?
Actually, we are unable to see it in full screen mode.
It is in full screen at my end, actually.
No. It is not in full screen. What we see is not full screen. So we are.
What you see is not.
We are
Okay.
seeing is the presenter mode, sir.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not too sure what's going on.
From
Sir, in your
display
laptop,
settings.
just replicate the screen. That way it will be easier. I think you have an extended screen concept. That's why it's happening. Try that.
Yeah, that's right. I do have an extended screen.
So what is happening is the presenter's view is getting in for us, and we are seeing you must be seeing the audience screen.
Oh, is it? How's it now?
No, it is still remaining the same. The screens have to be swapped. Okay. So I think let's continue with this because again, this will become a distraction.
Yes.
Let's continue with this one.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm not too
For the
sure.
rest participants, we will share this recording link, sir. So we can continue, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay. So the global average is 2.8 tons carbon dioxide per ton of steel. But the important thing to note is that all of these four progress lines towards by 2050 converges towards near net zero. And the bandwidth at that point is between 400 kilograms to 50 kilograms carbon dioxide per ton of steel. Now, these are progress levels. It's very important to understand that these are progress levels. These are not absolute levels. So we understand that the industry is in a transition mode, and because we work globally and different steel plants are in different points within these four lines, and therefore it is left to the steel industry to make sure that they are at least below the global average to be eligible to be part of at least level 1 of responsible steel. And then they start to make the journey towards near net zero, progressing in phases and achieving close to near net zero by 2050, or which was the time frame. Now, there are two very important things that I'd like to point out here. One is, of course, for us, the scope boundary includes scopes 1, direct emissions, scope 2, indirect emissions related to the energy intensity, and scope 3, which includes extraction, transportation of all raw materials that gets into steel production. So we don't exclude any material. We include all the materials that gets into steel production. And the other thing is, for us, the boundary is up to the crude steel. So which means that it's from cradle to the crude steel. That's the emission that we take into account in our assessment framework. And the reason for that is because, as I said to you before, we work globally and we want to have a common denominator by which we could assess steel plants across the world. Now, when you go past the crude steel, as you all very well know, there's a lot of heterogeneity in production. You then have flat, long, wire tube, structural steel sections. It creates a complexity to model all of those things, and it creates a complexity to have a common denominator. But the crude steel offers an ability and a flexibility to have a common denominator. That's the reason why we've chosen crude steel. And we are not alone. What you see there in the bottom, where you have 5 different zones that are shaded, these are model and framework from the IEA, which follows a very similar model. So this is principle 10, and this is how we assess and we measure. And when steel's certification would be launched in the next 2 to 3 months' time, this would become fully active. At the moment now, we have steel plants that are being part of a test phase, and we are monitoring them and assessing them on these parameters as part of a test phase. What our studies have shown is that by 2030, we need the global steel production to be at least below level 1. At least. And that should be the ambition. That should be the direction of travel for the industry, and that's what we are trying to. We are working toward. That's our objective, really. Now, there are two important things in any emission-related question. The first thing is, of course, the emission intensity, and the second parameter is the product carbon footprint. So you need both the greenhouse gas emissions data that comes from our audit, and you need the product carbon footprint, which the industry is anyway producing now. And then there's a third thing that is getting increasingly very heavily demanded by the end users that use steel, which is the circularity. So the responsible steel standard requires the steel producer to define the product carbon footprint, to define the circularity in our standard, and the greenhouse gas transition and where they are in terms of the progress level is, of course, identified through our audit process. And in our certificate, which will be publicly available, that certificate would of course carry the information across all of these 3 important parameters as part of the audit process. In terms of the standards, we were supposed to start at 10:30 p.m. for me here locally, and I believe I had a 45-minute time, which I probably may have exceeded. So I'll try to accelerate now and finish as quick as possible. I'll probably take another 5-10 minutes more to wrap this up. Okay, thank you. So standard development process, if you look at, there are several criteria for it. Now, the World Trade Organization has defined 6 key principles for standard development, and that includes consultative process, that includes the importance of transparency, and it also underlines the importance of a governance. And it also says that if you already have an established standard, then you don't want to duplicate a standard. These are principles given by WTO, and that's what we have followed. And also ICL which is another framework related to sustainable standards. We are a member of ICIL. We follow the ICIL code of practice, and that's how we basically function. The steel decarbonization standards world is, it's pretty crowded. There's a lot of conversation about steel, about decarbon. Those of us who are metallurgists in the room here, we've never heard of some of these things some 20 years ago. There was nobody discussed about decarbonization and other things some 15, 20 years ago. But now it's become a mainstream conversation. We have a lot of interest in steel. Steel is in the spotlight. So in fact, I was just curious. I did do a very quick search in Google to on India steel decarbonization. I got more than 100,000 hits and results of information that just happened in the last 6 months. So there's a lot of spotlight on India. There's a lot of spotlight on decarbonization. There's a lot of initiatives. What this slide shows is some of the key initiatives in the market. The initiatives related to standards and measurement frameworks, they include, of course, responsible steel, which is the standard. The others you see here, IEA, the Science-Based Targets Initiative, they are not really standards, but they are frameworks and they are commitments. So you make a commitment with the SBTi, you make a commitment with First Movers Coalition. The World Steel, of course, has a CO2 methodology and has a life cycle analysis model. And then so is ISO, which has got 14404, 14064, so on and so forth. And then you have target setting bodies that work on the specifically on the demand side, such as the Steel Zero, with whom we work very closely. They are part of the climate group. And the industrial decarbonization, which is part of UNIDO. We again work with them as well. And then there's a new standard that's come up from the US, which is called GSCC, which of course does not follow all the principles of transparency and stakeholder consultative process, and it's more towards an electric arc furnace secondary steel production model. I want to spend a little bit of time on the solution kit. There's essentially 3 pillars to the solution kit of decarbonization, as you all know. Fuel switching is right on top of them. You have other stuff like the technology replacement, where you're looking at models like Hisarna, Corex. And then, of course, you have the carbon capture and storage. Each of these, has its own merits and demerits, and depending on the country the steel is being produced, some would be more relevant than the other. But fundamentally, what we've noticed is that the Hisarna model seems to be pretty effective in terms of reducing the emission intensity, in terms of its ability to use locally available coal, and also from a cost point of view. So these are the different technology toolkits, and the cost per ton and the emission intensity per ton. Obviously, it's no surprise the green hydrogen DRI is the lowest carbon emission intensity, less than 50 kilograms, but there's not a lot of scale. You have a few sites in the Europe that is currently in pilot phases trying to produce it. But the capacity right now, what we know from secondary research, is close to about 6 to 7 million tons, maximum 10 million tons of green hydrogen currently under various stages of implementation. That's nowhere near what the industry needs. From an Indian perspective, really, the hydrogen-based DRI is probably having a lot of promise, because the country doesn't have enough natural gas, and therefore, at some point in time, hydrogen becomes a very key role. At the moment, India has a lot of DRI, and also electric arc furnace, but both of these archetypes use a lot of coal in it. And that needs to change at some point in time, and we hope the transition would happen in the country sooner than later. These are the cost components of all of this production. Obviously, again, a green hydrogen-based production is the highest cost amongst all the other archetypes. But if you look at the cost curves of most of the other models, they are all in the order of between $350 to $400 a ton. Of course, these are numbers that keep changing. Financial figures are never static; they are dynamic, and therefore, this just gives you an indication of which archetype is far more efficient in terms of cost and intensity. Now, the H2 DRI, the coal-based DRI, perhaps is a low cost, definitely, as you can see from these this infograph. However, from an emission standpoint, the coal-based H2 DRI is perhaps not the best option, because it's got a very high emission intensity. So you need to make a balance between the cost and the emission intensity and come up with something that's suitable for the country in which the site is included. I want to just a little bit spend time on our activities in India, our membership in India. I've not included all the names, but certainly the largest steel producers in the country are members of Responsible Steel. Tata Steel is a member, JSW is a member, JSPL is a member, and we hope to have SAIL very soon as a member in Responsible Steel. We've had discussions with Bokara Steel, and we have discussion with other colleagues in SAIL. And I hope at the end of this meeting, we can reach to some conclusion on that. Our members have done an incredible amount of job in their commitments towards decarbonization, and they are also growing their capacity. The current capacity is close to about 47 million tons, but this is projected to grow more than double in the next 6 years and reach almost 140 million tons by 2030. And these companies are in various forms of pilot involving hydrogen and carbon capture and other technology archetypes in terms of coal gasification and things like that. We engage very closely with the supply side and demand side in India. And the demand side, we work along with our partner, Steel Zero. I also work very, very closely with the Ministry of Steel, Government of India. I've been involved in discussions with the ministry prior to the commencement of the 13 task forces. We've had some discussions around policy. We interact with the ministry continuously. Also in terms of assisting and supporting some work around the marginal abatement cost calculations for India. We attend a lot of events in India. I'm in India, as I said to you before, more than 4 times in a year, being part of public and private events. In the last year, I want to highlight 2 important things. One was, of course, the First Movers Coalition event that happened in Delhi, where we had a keynote and we managed a panel. I managed a panel, and the Secretary, Ministry of Steel, was part of the panel as well to share his thoughts and views to the members. That was a very successful event for us. And we also hosted a side event in Goa as part of the Clean Energy Ministerial last year. We are very closely involved in multilateral initiatives, which what I mean by that is initiatives that are led by different countries or different bodies. The first thing I'd like to flag is, of course, the First Movers Coalition launched what's called as a Near Zero Steel 2030 campaign. This was launched last year, and we worked with them very closely. And in fact, the First Movers Coalition has used the Responsible Steel's Progress Level 4 to define what's near net zero steel. There's a lot of discussion about what is green steel. How do you define green steel? And we try to stay. In fact, if you've noticed, I've never used the word green so far in this discussion with you, and that's because at Responsible Steel, we don't use the term green anywhere in our documentation or publication, because what is green for one country may not be green for the other country. There's a lot of heterogeneity, and we try to avoid. We don't use the term green. We want to see progressive acceleration towards near net zero steel. So we always call it as a sustainable steel or a responsible steel, and refrain from using green steel. So First Movers Coalition wanted to define the near net zero steel, and they have chosen the Progress Level 4 of responsible steel to reflect what's a near net zero. The other initiatives, of course, the Steel Standards Principle. And as I said to you before, there's a lot of heterogeneity, there's a lot of players, multiple standards, multiple measurement frameworks, and it's a very confused state right now, and the industry is not clear which one to follow. And the Responsible Steel played a very pivotal role in bringing across various stakeholders like the UNIDO, the World WTO, the World Steel, the IDDI. We all got together and said we'll work together and we'll come up with a common measurement framework, common methodologies and frameworks to measure and assess what's near zero and assess the transition. And these Steel Standard Principles was adopted and launched during the COP 2023 in Dubai. So the photograph that you see here is all these participants from all of these organizations that I mentioned to you, along with the minister from the United Arab Emirates. So as we discussed before, the standard is critical. The standard is pivotal for a number of things. It is suitable for modeling in a 1.5 trajectory. It is relevant and suitable for specifications, for procurement. So if somebody is buying steel and let's say, for example, a construction or the Government of India buys steel for its construction projects, the National Highway Authority of India buys steel for laying out roads, dams, and whatever. Then in their tender documents, in their specification sheets, they could say we would need our contractors to use responsible steel certified steel at least level 2 or level 3 by 2030, and level 3 and level 4 by 2050, and then level 4 and better than level 4 past 2050. So you can have a very clear specification, and the standard and the certification supports that. We support policy. There's a lot of policy and regulation that are happening worldwide. We all, I'm sure you all have heard about the CBAM that's going to kick in by 2026. I worked very closely with the CBAM team that's worked on steel, and we know it's going to come in 2026, and a similar exercise is happening in the US as well. I talked about opportunity in the beginning, and I believe India has got a very strong opportunity as the capacity doubles between now and 2030. If India starts to produce a low embodied carbon steel and meets the threshold of these regulatory frameworks, then there's a great opportunity to increase exports and get a premium on the product and increase revenues and have growth in the steel industry by meeting all of these export requirements. Because as you all know, the production capacities in Western economies is actually going down as we speak. And increasingly, the supplies are coming from Asia. So we have our members from, say, for instance, from Korea, from Japan, and all the other China, and all the other countries supplying to the Western economies. And those supplies can happen from India as well as India increases its capacity. Right now, there's not a lot of export going on into European markets. There's only a little phase of time because of the Ukraine crisis and all that. There was a lot of supply happening, but traditionally the supplies from India has been to the Middle East, to the Far East and Southeast Asia and all that. But there's a real opportunity here to start exporting to the US, to Europe, and OECD countries, if India is able to meet the carbon requirements. So it can support a lot of policy initiatives. It can support carbon tax regime. The carbon taxes is coming, and I work very closely with a lot of other countries. I travel extensively to Japan, to Korea, and to many other countries. And all of these countries, there's an increasing dialogue in the market to come up with carbon taxes. And at some point in time, we think it might come to a reality in India as well, in some form or shape. And in order to piece together all of this policy, the standard would be relevant. It's also relevant, as I told you before, in terms of financing. The banks can use them, the asset managers can use them for transition finance, for transition bonds and sustainable linked bonds. We already work pretty close with the Sustainable Steel Principles, which is part of the RMI. They have something called as Climate Aligned Finance, and 6 banks are part of that, though they include ING, Standard Chartered Bank, Credit Agricole, UniCredit, and others. The climate bonds works on the bonds. They are active in India as well. And we work with all of these organizations to try and support, to provide the standard and certification which can support measurement, reporting, and verification. So there's a whole ecosystem, the 360-degree support that the standard and certification can provide across all the pillars: technology pillar, the policy pillar, and the finance pillar. This really is my last slide, and I've just taken an opportunity to show what we are currently working on. We're working on chain of custody, which is super critical for the automotive industry, and that's going to be coming out later this year. We're working on claims guidance, which means what claims can be made using the Responsible Steel certification label. We are trying to work on our assurance program. We continuously improve our assurance program, and that's an ongoing work for us. So as I said to you before, we are in a test phase on version 2.0, and that would be finished and wrapped out, and the certification would be rolled out in Q2. By end of April, May, we will have the version 2.1 release, and we'll have the first Responsible Steel certified steel in the market. And we are also working on stainless steel thresholds. It's important that I highlight to you that the current standard and the measurement framework that you saw, that is up to 8% alloy content. And therefore, anything that's above 8% alloy content, we call it as high alloy and stainless steel. So the standard is not currently designed for that. That's because of the complexities that comes out of ferroalloys and all of that. Those emission factors are pretty high. We're currently working on that, and that would be released over the next year or so. So these are some of the large-scale work that is underway at the Secretariat. Let me just stop here and see if you have any questions. I want to thank you for your time and attention so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiva. I must say it's a very enlightening session. May I now request the house is open for the audience to directly interact with Shiva, and you can also, sir, post the questions. in the chat box. Sir, we have one question, sir. We can take
Yeah.
it. Shall I read it out, sir?
Yeah, please.
Scrap availability depends on the economic growth, and without scrap availability, emission reduction will heavily depend on disruptive technologies like Hyrex steelmaking. What should be important for us if we want to achieve net zero without relying too much on technologies?
Sorry, I think I probably not. I missed what you said. Could you please repeat?
In a crux, sir, what the participant is asking that what should be the important for us as a SAIL if we want to achieve net zero without relying too much on new technologies?
You mean what technology options to consider?
Apart from technologies options, sir, what other initiatives we can take to achieve the net zero, sir?
Look, I mean,
within the existing technological framework, that's what they're trying to say.
okay, so one thing what we have noticed is this is more relevant for for India perhaps. There's a lot of talk about hydrogen, green hydrogen, and all of these things, but in practical terms, it's going to take some time to get to scale with all of these things. But the first thing that the sites can do is to try and improve the efficiency of what they currently produce. And that could come from how do you use your off gases, that could come from how do you handle the heat, that could come from things like dry heat quenching and things like that. We don't get into technical aspects of steel. I sometimes discuss about it because that's because of my background, and I come from a steel industry background. But at Responsible Steel, we are tech agnostic, so we're not specifically involved in the technical aspects of it. But what we do know from our discussions and analysis and research is that the first step to take is to look at what efficiency gaps are there and how can you plug those efficiencies. Well, that can some studies show that it can make an impact almost close to 15-20%, depending on the markets that you operate. The renewable energy adaptation is another thing. How much of renewable energy you can integrate in your processes, that's another thing. And of course, we have a lot of social criteria as well that is required as part of our assessment. Then comes, of course, carbon capture. One other thing that we have noticed is, of course, if you shift the relining date in advance, right? Now, if you have say, for example, a 25-year window to reline, if you shift the 25-year, I'm talking about the primary steel blast furnace, if you shift that relining from 25 years to say 18, 19, or 20 years, that gap of 5 years advancement actually leads in a lot of emission reduction. And that's something that we noticed. Our empirical modeling and what we notice from steel sites across the world have shown that it's important to try and advance the relining. What we advocate is that we and others advocate is that at some point in time there should be a policy in the market to stop relining itself. Now, this is a very challenging question. I know it's a debatable question in countries like India and China, where it's heavily blast furnace dominated, and a lot of investments is currently being made. So it's a critical question. But at some point in time, we hope there will be policies in place to show that when you install a new blast furnace, at that point in time, there is a plan to include carbon capture as part of it. There is a plan to include hydrogen as part of it. There's a plan to include certain new technologies and tools to reduce the intensity, because a new blast furnace has the capacity and the capability to reduce intensity as opposed to a legacy asset. Sorry.
Moitra, sir,
Yes.
mute yourself, sir.
Yes, sir. Can I have a question, sir?
Sir. Okay, sir.
This is Praveen, sir, from Environment Management Department, Bhilai Steel Plant. Okay, my question might sound very new. What I would like to ask is, we have the systems in place, some of the systems. For example, ISO 14001, okay, which works on the principle of PDCA, okay, plan, do, check, and act. Okay, can't we customize the existing systems, okay, setting the targets for zero CO2 emissions and acting accordingly, empowering our people and setting the technology and achieving what the different levels of CO2 emission that you have mentioned. Okay, what my question is, which way it is going to differentiate, that is this responsible steel standard differentiates itself from the other standards, for example, ISO 14001. If we really customize ISO 14001, in terms of achieving the zero CO2 emissions. Will it not work?
Right. So the ISO 14001 has a definitive, it's got a purpose that is different from what the responsible steel standard does. So now that's purely environmental focused and not specifically per se for steel. Our standard is designed for steel industry only. And the whole purpose of the standard is to measure, monitor, and report steel decarbonization. And not only that, as I mentioned to you before, there are 12 other principles within the standard that includes the social criteria as well, sourcing as well. So I don't think the 14001 has any role to play on the sourcing and other criteria which the responsible steel does. So ours is dedicated towards steel, includes both raw material sourcing, the social factors, and the environmental principles. So all three of the ESG has to be met with and passed during the audit.
Sir, good morning. From my side, Kaushik Sengupta here from Rourkela Steel Plant. So I have a query, sir, because you have a corruption perception index, human freedom index, and then the environment performance index. Do you follow your own procedures, or you take the help of other agencies which do this type of studies?
No, we follow based on other measurement frameworks. For instance, for example, in mining, for example, there are already existing standards in mining. So you have the Responsible Mining Associations, so IRMA, you have TSM, you have Better Coal. You have some of these already established measurement frameworks. So we follow that. We don't want to reinvent a wheel when it's already been developed. So wherever you have available frameworks of measurement, we follow that. We also corroborate what the steel side gives us through public media, through our own investigation, through our own research, and we try to validate the claims made. So when our steel, by the way, we are site-based. We don't audit a company, we audit a site. So if in the case of SAIL, for example, you have Bokaro, you have Rourkela, you have Vizag steel plant, Salem steel plant, you have different steel plants. So it will be a site that will be audited. So when we audit a site and the site makes a particular claim, whether it's related to transparency, whether it's related to corruption, whether it's related to procurement practices or anything of that sort, we would go based on what you produce to us as documents supporting your claims. But we would also validate that through our own independent research. And it has happened in the past that sometimes we notice some discrepancies through when we research these claims that are being made. We notice some differences and we go back to the steel side and tell them, this is what we've noticed. Could you please comment? So that's the process in which it works. And then it leads to a correction. It leads to an improvement process. If it's a serious non-conformity, then of course we'll have to redo the audit. But more often than not, what we've noticed is that the steel side then puts preventive or corrective measures in place and rechanges and adapts and updates their processes connected to that.
Okay, sir.
By the way, this is not just I mean, this is things we notice across the world. It's not just a developing countries issue. We notice a similar problem around the world. For example, and our standard is way over the local regulations and local criteria, and we always insist that our standard has to be followed. To give you an example, some cases, for example, maternity leave. We require certain amount of minimal maternity leave to be provided to the employees working in the steel side. But sometimes it is less. The country's local requirement is lesser than that, and so the steel side will tell us, we follow the national regulation, we follow the local guidelines for these factors. So why should we follow yours? And so the question is always that we want the site to do better than what is required and aspire to keep growing. So essentially we follow what is laid out in the standard, because that is developed based from the industry's feedback. It's not something that Responsible Steel wrote the standard. The standard is written through a consultative process from the industry, and the industry wants to make those changes. So we validate the claim, what's being made across all of these parameters, including the transparency and other things that you mentioned now. That's a great question, by the way, because this
We'll
comes
take,
up
one more
across the
last
world.
question over the mic, and then we'll see the
Sir, one
chat.
question here from EMD Kolkata. Sir, what are the benefits in terms of marketing and finance when we are going for the responsible steel?
that's an excellent question. I'm not too sure why my camera is blocked as well. Anyway,
Yeah.
so first of all, it's a branding thing. You make a commitment to your stakeholders that you're following some of the highest standards and principles in production of steel. It improves the image, it improves the brand positioning of the company that is achieving the site certification. So you are able to tell to your stakeholders, buyers, suppliers, that you're following a certain standard in production of steel. And that's one of the principal reasons why our members have chosen to be a member of Responsible Steel and also have chosen to get certified. That's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, there's a lot of business value when you have a certification from Responsible Steel, and that business value comes from entering into markets which you'll be able to demonstrate your ability to, to meet certain thresholds, to meet certain emission thresholds, and that gets accepted, and you are therefore able to, do things like export and all of that, and to demonstrate how you produce steel. The third thing is your ability to convince your financial institutions, banks and asset managers when you're looking for transition finance or operating capital. These things are becoming a decision factor increasingly across the world, even for an operating capital, the OPEX capital, working capital. Slowly, the emission factors are becoming criteria. So the standard and the certification helps you to navigate across your ability to raise capital, to deal with the policy and regulatory framework, and increase the stature and branding of your organization as a whole. I mean, like we're noticing, for example, automotive sorry.
I have two questions. I'm audible. Hello.
Yes.
You're audible.
My first question is, why Indian steel industries are not adopting DRI EF route than conventional BF route when it has less CO2 emission intensity than conventional route? What are the challenges?
I think it's a very specific for an industry to answer that question. But from what I have seen, I'm just speaking myself now as an individual, is of course the cost of natural gas and lack of availability of natural gas. You have a lot of DRI sites in India, but those DRI sites are heavily relying on the coal-based DRI. So that's because there's access to coal, and that's relatively cheap. It's economic. It's really economics, right? So every country has its right to use the natural resources that is available to them, and India has a right to use the coal that's available in India, and therefore that's what drives the archetype. That's what drives the technology as well. But the cost of natural gas is very prohibitive in India to make economical sense to use it in DRI as it is in other countries. I've been to several sites across the world where you have natural gas that's available at a low cost, and then you convert them. You take them through an SMR process, and then you're able to very efficiently cut down your emission intensity of the pellets and HBIs that comes out of those DRI process, which is something that India doesn't have. But having said that, some of our members are setting up DRI-based production using a combination of hydrogen and a combination of other forms of energy sources. The other thing is, of course, the grid intensity in India is very high. The grid intensity, the actual grid intensity is, again, it's coal-based, and the kilowatt hour, carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour in India is one of the highest in the world. And it's going to take a lot of time to decarbonize the grid. I think it's about in the order of 340 or 350 kilowatt hour per carbon dioxide. You compare that with the grid intensity, for example, here in Ontario and Canada, it's all hydro and nuclear. And we are sitting at a grid intensity of 15-20 kilowatt hour carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour. So the difference is huge. So there are intrinsic challenges, but the industry is making transition. Private companies are changing. That's what we've seen.
But sir, in the budget, this current budget, the government has announced that they're going to give incentive for the coal gasification route. So rather than directly using coal in the DRI process, if we use syngas generated from coal gasification, I think that may be a little better option if natural gas is not available in abundance.
Yes, that's an excellent point because I've noticed that that there are specific references in the budget has been made by the finance minister connected to steel decarbonization and coal gasification. There are some funds allocated to it as well. But again, like I said, some of the private industries are already investing and already doing this work, and it's only a question of time before some of these are taken up to scale. And this what's been announced in the budget needs to roll out into the industry, and perhaps SAIL being a public sector undertaking, you would be one of the first to get access to these funds and start implementing it within one of your sites.
So one more question. Generally, what responsible steel does it? Only audit, or do you handhold for in reduction of CO2 emission intensity with the company?
No, yeah. So like I said to you, we're not technology people. We're tech agnostic. We don't get involved in the technical side of things. We just basically audit and certify based on our standard, and our standard is not technology standard.
I have a question. Who are the auditors, responsible steel auditors in India?
So there's not one. There's more than one. There are multiple auditors in India. DNV is one of them. TUV Nord is another. CARES International is other. So if I'm happy to share a link of auditors. You can see that in our website. If you go to responsiblesteel.org, you would see all the list of auditors that we have accredited and approved. And if SAIL wants to use an auditor that is not.
Sir, you can continue.
Sorry?
You can continue.
What is the strategy for SAIL to get responsible steel? What is your advice?
I mean, the first step is to become a member of Responsible Steel, and then you determine which site you want to be certified, and then we know, for example, somebody reached us and said that Bokaro Steel wants to be certified, and so we were having this discussion with them. And we asked them, so there's one question here is because we are site-based, and Bokaro is a subsidiary of the SAIL, the parent body. So we asked them to issue us some sort of a approval from SAIL corporate body, telling that please audit and certify this site. So we need some sort of an approval from the corporate body of SAIL to whichever site that needs to be audited and approved. And we would audit and approve them. So the first thing is to become a member, and that membership can happen at a corporate level. The SAIL corporate as a whole can become a member and then nominate each site separately, or a particular site can become a member and then get certified. So both options are possible. It's left to the SAIL management to decide which ones they want to pursue.
Becoming a member is a stepping stone, sir. That's
right.
One more question. Is it required to have all the ISO certifications before going for responsible steel certification?
Not necessary. Yeah, I'm not too sure what you mean by all the ISO certifications.
All relevant.
But we have listed. We have if you want to. So at the core certification. So as I said to you before, there are two types of certification, two levels of certifications. At the first level, you would report your. Sorry.
Sir, you can continue, sir. That was the last question, sir. You can continue.
I'm sorry. At the first level, you would report your emissions based on any one of the ISO frameworks or any other framework that you follow. That's fine for us. You could follow 14404 or 14067 or any one of the ISO. You can follow and report to us, or even World Steel's methodology or any other methodology. That's at the core certification level. But when it comes to the steel certification, we would employ the principle 10, greenhouse gas and climate change in total, against which we will audit and we will certify. So we will do the audit ourselves, and then we will certify. That's at the steel certificate. But at the core certification, you could follow any of the ISOs that you currently follow.
Thank you, sir. For the participants, sir.
Rajesh.
Srimant, you wanted to say something. Srimant, you're muted. Srimant, you're muted. You wanted to ask a question.
Okay. The last question, sir, please. Malik, sir, please.
Sir, just one thing I had. Since Rourkela Steel Plant is also planning to have responsible steel certification, we are looking forward to input from your end as to how do you, in case you might have done for some companies, especially the principle 3, responsible sourcing of input materials. That is one challenge that we are seeing. That is one. And the local communities and the stakeholder engagement. Of course, SAIL does a lot of things here. So how you people have managed this particular principle 3, 8, and 9 for the companies?
Excellent question. That's an excellent question, sir. Now, principle 3, that's why we are in test phase now. So like, as I said to you before, our test phase is for testing principle 3 and principle 10, those are the two new principles that was added in September of last year and released as 2.0, which is what in a test phase now, and we are doing a trial phase now. So our members who are part of this trial phase are sharing the data, sharing information, sharing challenges that they are facing. So we have noticed that some of our members are not able to find all the information for all the materials. For example, some of them could not find support from their supply chain related to the mining suppliers. Some of them had some issues with scrap suppliers. So we've identified these challenges, and we're trying to put together procedures and policies to overcome some of those challenges. Now this is very complex because of the heterogeneity that is involved in steel. You could face something very specific in Rourkela, which perhaps in India itself, you may not find the same problem in Durgapur, for example. You may have a completely different set of problem. So we'll have to deal with it on a case-to-case basis as we start doing the audit and we start experiencing those constraints. We'd have to overcome that. So I would really encourage you to join our working groups. So we have working groups for P3. We have working groups for P10. And we also have a general working group that includes, this P8 and P9. We never had a lot of issues with the community. In fact, all of our members are doing a lot of good work with the community, and our auditors go and speak to the local community and ask them how is the steel plant. They have a set of questionnaire that do that, validate the claims. We've generally not had much issues on that.
Just a minute, sir. That particular 9.2, free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC. This is one area where we might have some issues. Though we do a lot of work, but there are some people who have been displaced. So they might be having grievances because they do not get job. So that would be an issue. Of course, that's our internal issue. But what essentially I would look forward from you is the T3 group. If we can get, Rajesh, if you can get the contact details of the group, we can get in touch. I think Mr. PK Sahu from our MSS team is also there. Sahu sir, I think it's for you because we are embarking on this journey, so we need their help.
That's why I asked for the strategy, because we are planning to have some certifications before going for responsible steel certification. So we want to engage one consultant. We have floated a tender for that, and who will handhold in getting the certificate. So that's why I asked what sort of ISO certifications are required.
I think Sausa is keeping in mind the paucity of time because we have a limited time. We can talk with them one-to-one. I think Kuppaswamy Sam, we will fall back on you later on. I think you'll support us. Rajesh,
absolutely.
I would request you to get that.
Thank you, sir. For the other participants, sir, considering the paucity of time, my apologies if some question remain unanswered. But we will compile the questions and we will request, I will mail it to Shiva and will request him to kindly please address this question. So, and for next, I would now request Sri Sanjay Dar sir, CGM HRD, for summarizing the proceedings and for giving the vote of thanks, sir.
That's up. If you have permission, last question, will you please allow? This is BK Giri. Sir, I have gone through the entire presentation, and at one end we realize that so far decarbonization journey is concerned, we are all on the same globe. But at the same time, it's true that our horizons with respect to developments, our demographic needs, as India as a large populations, their aspirations, what is the shortcut to attain the goal, what we have planned for? You understand, you are telling that you are very close to India and Indian conditions.
Sir, I wish I have a silver bullet to tell you or share with you that, use this bullet and you're done. But there is no shortcut. There is no silver bullet. You have to do what is required to be done to demonstrate the progress in the transition. And there's really no shortcut really. But there is one shortcut. There's one real what I've seen that is working in industry. This is the commitment and the passion. And the commitment and the passion needs to come from the leadership, really needs to come from the senior management. So when that starts, when the leadership decides, I think you are all in this phase now. I'm really enlightened. I'm really glad to, to listen to all of these questions and the participation from all of you. Thank each and every one of you for this very active participation. That shows a commitment. So that's really the first step to be aware of. There's somebody who said that I have a specific problem in 9.2. And I really applaud. I really appreciate his transparency in saying that he has this problem. So the important thing is to recognize that there are gaps, and therefore, in our website, if you go and see, you have a self-assessment tool. I would encourage you to use the self-assessment tool so you can do an assessment yourself before you start any of this process. And that self-assessment tool would give you the gaps and would also tell you what needs to be done. And then you can start putting together, plans, processes, procedures in place to make sure that those gaps are minimized. But other than that, there's no such thing as a shortcut or a silver bullet to take you from point A to point B. You'll have to make the journey from point A to point B. And we can help you to make the journey, but we cannot give a shortcut to to that journey. That doesn't exist really, unfortunately.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Over to Sanjay sir, Sanjay sir.
Thank you, Rajesh, and it's my honor and privilege to thank you all for your active participation. I'd like to thank all the executive directors and the CGMs and the team members who have joined us for this interaction. It's a very tight time for us. Start of the day and a lot of things pressing on us, and despite that, people have managed to fend off other tasks and stay here. So thank you very much for your participation and active interest. The fact that we have overshot the time is only a reflection of your interest. We have to make a trade-off. That's why we're closing. Otherwise, we would have continued. I'd like to thank Gupaswamy sir for giving us his insights and time. You have to appreciate it's a very late night for him also. He's practically staying up for the night just to interact with us. But the passion on both sides shows. We understand that whether it's from the speaker side or from the participation, we know that is a critical issue for us and we need to work on. Just to summarize what we have done, I will not summarize what was discussed. The slides are there, the presentation is there, but just putting it in context, what we have done today is help you put in context by getting a perspective from the larger global trends that are affecting us and putting them in perspective in terms of what kind of initiatives are being done within our own company. They will start making more sense for us. You shared with us about the importance of having standards, the importance of having stakeholder consultation, the importance of working as a collective group to figure out how do we take the journey of decarbonization. And it's part of a larger context of what we call the ESG framework. So there's a lot of social and governance issues also involved. So it's not something that's pure technology. We have to appreciate that. It's a holistic business perspective. And I'm happy that we have CGMs and EDs from all functions actually participating here. I'd just like to again appreciate that when we look at what SAIL is doing, we are going in for a lot of certifications. We are going in for a lot of standards. We are going in for BRSR standard. We have 13 task forces of the Steel Ministry on decarbonization. SAIL has a major role to play in that. Karsab is there online here, right? And this team from RDCS is very closely involved in the formation of those standards and rollout of the implementation of those action plans. We have a lot of certification going on for standards like EMS. So they all go into building the capacity and the infrastructure and the processes for responsible steel. So it doesn't go in vain. because at the end of the day, intent of all the standards converges. We're going in for SA 8000 also, and again, things like that are happening. Even in terms of capacity building, a lot of initiatives are being taken both at MTA level, at the plant level, and collectively we are working at things like internal quizzes and maturity assessment, questionnaires, and a lot of programs, and even resource development for programs, developing key resource persons for programs dealing with environment, even organizing summits with our major partners like FMF and Prime Metal. So a lot of work is happening. Our competitors are also into the space. We also have to get into the space. This is just an opening. I would request people that, ask your team to go to the responsible seat, silent seat. There's a lot of material available there, which can further enlighten us. Idea is we are using this as a platform to expand your horizons and starting point of a journey. And thank you for joining us on this journey. We look forward to more such interactions and more such, opening up of horizons. So not taking much time. I understand we are already behind schedule. Thank you all for your participation. And I'd like to thank again Goswami sir for his sharing his time and insight.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all the seniors, sir. Thank you for sparing the time and joining, sir. With that, I declare the session officially concluded, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you for being
Kuppusamy. I think we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a really, sir, very enlightening session, sir. Thank you, sir. And
Thank you.
special thanks for keeping you awake, sir, at so late in night, sir. That was the
No.
best. Only a little sweet spot we could squeeze, considering the time zone differences.
No, it's my pleasure. It's not new to me. I'm doing this regularly. We will try to also meet in person during my next trip to India.
Yes, sir. Please plan, sir. And we would actively need your support, and I will be sharing your some mail ID with your permission to our seniors.
Please do. Please do.
Yes. And we would actively need your support for moving in this journey forward, sir.
Please do. We look forward to having SAIL in our membership very soon this year, and we also look forward to certifying one of your sites also very soon. I'm really looking forward to working with SAIL.
Yes, sir.
Thank you
Please
so much.
update, sir, when you're visiting next, or anyone from your team, sir, so that we
Sure.
can further interact. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.